Welcome to The Conversation. My name is Brendan Malone, and in this episode, I want to talk about why fat pride is a very bad idea. Let me start this episode with a very important caveat. To those who are watching who are perhaps overweight or who are struggling with their weight in some way, I want to make it clear that this video is not in any way going to ridicule, insult, or make fun of you because of the weight issues that you are experiencing. And I feel it's important to start this way because what I've seen lately is a lot of so-called conservative commentators who have responded to the issue of what has been called fat pride by effectively insulting, abusing, and name-calling in a really, I think, very repugnant and inhumane kind of way at those who express the notion of fat pride, who espouse this, a lot of whom themselves are overweight, and their weight, therefore, becomes the target of their reaction and their response to this, and they throw insults at the person because of their weight. I'm not interested in that at all for a couple of reasons. As you'll see in a moment, I've got my own story about being morbidly obese, and I'm going to share that today as part of this episode. But even more importantly, this is not an authentically conservative response because it fails to actually respect the humanity and the dignity of the human person that you are engaging with. It lacks all humanity to ridicule and insult another person in this sort of way because of some particular characteristic they have about them. A humane response is to engage with the ideas and to always respect the dignity of the person. So I want to make that clear that if you're watching, this is not going to in any way be about insulting people who struggle with their weight. But fat pride, as I said, is a very bad idea, and I really wanted to make this video to talk about this because there's a lot of danger actually in this particular ideology. I'm not surprised that this has come about because really fat pride is ultimately an extension of a culture of radical individualism that is very much grounded now in identity politics. There's a lot of reasons why this has sprung up, the notion of fat pride where people are saying that you should embrace being overweight and often morbidly obese, extremely dangerously overweight, not just a little bit of puppy fat, but extremely overweight as something that is a central part of your identity as a person, that you should have pride in that. There's even someone recently who was claiming that fat phobia, as they are calling it, is actually grounded in racism. There's a whole lot of identity politics it's embroiled in all of this. It really comes to us courtesy of lots of different people. Freud is a big figure in all of this, the whole psychologizing of the human person and the way in which your psychology and that as a tool for shaping your own identity starts to separate you from your body, and then you would seek to sort of justify your own psychological states and what they tell you about your identity as sort of being norm and as something that should be celebrated. The Frankfurt School's part of this, Wilhelm Reich. There's lots of different people who have all contributed to this, but the point is, this is sort of what I would call a natural and obvious extension of the fundamental flaws of identity politics starting to play themselves out, where people would now just take their body as is and then seek to justify and embrace that state of however it is they live their life and claim it as a right and claim it as something that you should be proud of and as part of your identity. But there's a really major flaw in all of this that gets to the heart of not just why this idea is so bad, which is what I want to talk about, the particular logical flaw in this approach, but also there's an extreme danger here. This is part of my story, as I mentioned earlier. The thumbnail for this video is a photograph of me. I'll put it up again on screen now so you can see that this is me that you're looking at right now. About 20 odd years ago, basically what happened was I was a young guy who had a little bit of excess weight when I was in high school, but because part of this was because I was eating badly. I was in a very low income family, a very poor family, and whatever money I managed to earn from my paper round delivering papers, I would waste on junk food. It just wasn't something we had a lot of money for, so once I was old enough to do that myself, I just started effectively binging this. But here's the thing. At that age, I didn't get into any sort of morbid obesity because I was biking 5 kilometers to school every day and then 5 kilometers home every day. So 10 kilometers of cycling every single day sort of helps to keep the worst excesses of that in check. Now, I was overweight and I was carrying a little bit of extra weight. It's sort of, I would describe it more as a sort of puppy fat type situation. But then what happened was I left high school and I stopped cycling 10 Ks a day. In fact, I did very little physical activity not long after leaving high school. It all sort of came to an end, and very quickly the weight started piling on. It got to a point one day where I was in my early 20s and I started to experience regular heart palpitations at times when you should not be experiencing heart palpitations, like just sitting in a chair watching television or lying down to go to sleep at night, and all of a sudden my heart would start racing. And this went on for a while before I finally decided to do something about it, because it was actually starting to concern me. I go to see my doctor. My doctor refers me to a specialist, a cardiac specialist. And he says that cardiac specialist is probably going to want to take a whole lot of measurements and check you out and maybe put you up to one of those heart rhythm holsters for a 24-hour period and measure your heartbeat and see what's going on. Well, I go to see this cardiac specialist and he says, well, the first thing is we need to ascertain your weight. So jump on the scales over there and we'll weigh you. Now, the scales he's got in his office are those sort of standard medical scales, the mechanical ones with the needle that swings, and they're sort of a bit more than your usual bathroom scales, and they go up to about, I think it was 130 kg. Now, I get on those scales and immediately, clunk, the needle just flies straight to the 130, and you could almost hear the scales screaming, right? It was a very loud and obvious slam. There was no bouncing of that needle, no ambiguity. It was a hard swing wildly to the right. It maxed out. I look at this. The cardiologist looks at this and he says to me, okay, you're more than 130 kgs. We need to weigh you over here on these other scales. And these other scales, he points me in the direction of, it's basically like this big giant piece of tread plate metal, and welded to that tread plate metal was a steel frame chair. You know, one of those chairs that's got a steel frame and a single piece of plastic makes the chair. It's the kind of thing you see in community centres all around the world. And this thing is welded to the steel plate. And basically what this is a smaller version of like a weigh station that you might have at a local rubbish tip, where you drive your car and trailer fully loaded with rubbish onto the big steel plate and it bounces around for a bit as it's weighing your car. You drive into the tip, dump the rubbish, then come back out and get weighed again. And whatever the difference in weight is, that's what you get charged for the amount of rubbish that you've dumped. Now, this is a smaller version of that. It's a sort of a big solid square tread plate on one of those kind of weighing machines, and you sit in the chair and get weighed. So I sit in the chair and he says to me, you are just under, it was about 140 kgs. It was slightly under 140 kgs. At that moment, I was kind of shocked because, part of it was I just didn't think about my weight at all. I just blithely assumed. I knew there was a problem and I knew I was overweight, but it's funny how you can convince yourself that it's not as bad as you think it is. And that's, I think, one of the issues with fat pride is often people in that situation are very good at trying to talk themselves down, even though in their heart of hearts, you know there's a problem. It was interesting, after I actually started to lose weight, and it's something I still notice today, I still have one of the, perhaps what you would call the coping or cloaking mechanisms that I used to use. And that was, I often used to put my arms around my stomach and even hunch over a little bit when I was even standing or talking to people or even sitting in chairs. It was sort of a way of trying to hide as desperately as best I could, my clearly overweight stomach. And so it's interesting that particular tick still remained with me even after I lost a lot of that weight. But the thing was, here I was in the situation where all of a sudden I was confronted with the true reality, and this is extremely dangerous. And this cardiac specialist says to me, look, you need to actually do something about the weight. You need to, even if you just start walking and exercising regularly, you need to do something. And so I went from there and I started doing that, and a very long journey, really, of many years actually. It's only in recent years where I've really knocked off most of that weight. I went through a period where I really struggled to lose the weight. I didn't understand. I started walking and doing exercise again, but I didn't understand what was actually required and what was needed, and I didn't understand that in actual fact, 80% of weight is down to what you put in your mouth, and it's only really about 15 to 20% that's about the exercise you're doing. And so I thought I was eating healthy, but I was still eating far too much, and actually it was just because I wasn't eating as much of the sweet stuff, I was still eating foods that weren't actually helpful. And so it was a very long journey before I finally, if you like, cracked the code by listening to experts and sort of learning from them about what I needed to do. And it's really only in the last couple of years that I've really started to climb back down into a much, much healthier situation. To give you an idea right now, and I'm currently working my way down, I'm still slightly overweight at the moment. I have some belly fat that I'm carrying that is not a good situation for me to be in, but I'm not anywhere near what I was. I was in a very morbidly obese category back then. I'm now almost 50 kgs lighter than what I was back then, to give you an idea of how much weight was lost. But here's the thing, that was extremely dangerous. I've got no doubt in my mind that if I'd carried on like that, then I would have had serious issues. My back was already starting to create major problems for me because I was carrying far too much weight. There were my heart issues. There were other health issues that were manifesting themselves in my life because I was so overweight. If I had embraced the notion of fat pride, I suspect that I may well have killed myself, or I would certainly be in a very, very serious state of ill health right now. It's almost certain, I think, that I would have diabetes. It's just, I think that's a given, along with a whole lot of other very serious issues. So I'm extremely grateful on this side of it that I didn't embrace the ideology of fat pride. And that's really the big danger here that sort of lies at the heart of this ideology. That in actual fact, it will kill people. This is often the way with a lot of these identity politics-based ideologies, is in actual fact, they are extremely harmful to the human person. We've embraced a lie in our culture that to satisfy your own psychological desires or your own appetites and to normalize those things and say, well, obviously because I have a particular appetite, that must be a good thing and therefore I should celebrate it and embrace it. That way of living out your life is actually quite contrary to human flourishing, because not all of our appetites are going to lead us to a place of more authentic human flourishing. They can actually be extremely dangerous for us. So, for example, the person who has an excessive appetite for alcohol falls into alcoholism if they embrace that appetite and try and formulate it as part of their identity and say, I have alcohol pride and I celebrate the fact that I have a desire for alcohol and I'm going to consume as much as I can. You see how dangerous that is to the human person and to human flourishing. But there's another problem here. There's actually a logical flaw that's also quite serious with the notion of fat pride. Really, fat pride is trying to react to something that is another particular problem in our culture, and that is the obsession with body beautiful. And that is a fair point. There is an obsession with physical form. In many ways, we have an overzealous obsession and worship of the physical form, or what we might deem to be the perfect physical form. And we tend to, as a result, put a lot of worth in that, as if somehow that's a measure of your value and your worth in society. A certain amount of this is sort of inescapable. We are attracted to people who have a beauty to their physical form. There's sort of no doubting that. But when you turn this into an obsession and you sort of idolize it, that's often what our culture, particularly corporate culture, has done this really as a tool. It's again, we go back to Freud and the sexualizing of the person and then using sex as a tool to sell products. And so this is sort of a big part of this. So fat pride is a reaction to another unhealthy problem in society, but it's the wrong reaction. It's an unhealthy reaction to an unhealthy reaction. And so what it's trying to fight back against is this whole body obsession and this notion of body as the place where you find your value and your worth and your meaning. But here's the irony. That's exactly what fat pride is doing as well. It's saying that we should fixate on the person's body. In this case, we should say that obesity is something we should take pride in. It's grounding our identity and our worth in our bodies still. And that's a real problem. That's ultimately the same problem as the Body Beautiful movement has. The obsession with grounding personal worth and identity in the body. So here's the two keys to overcoming this ideology, I would suggest. The first is to recognize and to constantly be reminding yourself that your worth is not found in your body or your career or how much money you have or how many things that you own or who you date or who you are married to. Your personal worth is actually found in your dignity. The fact that you are made in the image and likeness of God, as many of us who are people of faith would describe it, but the fact that you are a human person, you have a profound uniqueness in the whole order of creation that is different to anything else around you. you have abilities as a human person that are really quite profound. And as people of faith, we would say that the fact that you are made in the image and likeness of God, that essential sacred order which has underpinned so much of the West, actually helps us to recognize who we are and how we should treat each other. The dignity that you have is a call to me to respect you and to treat you with love. That's why any conservative commentator who wants to insult people, or any commentator who wants to abuse and insult people who are overweight for their weight, if they express ideas of what are known as fat pride, that's why that's a problem. And it's wrong, because it is a violation of the traditional sacred order of the West. We've understood that being made in the image of God gives us a profound dignity and a uniqueness that really matters. And that's where our worth is found. It's not found in our body. It just isn't. And to try and seek that out, well, you'll never satisfy that. The reality is the body is a constantly aging thing that, as I heard one commentator say once, the body is a donkey. And sometimes you have to beat it to get it to go where you want it to go. It's a thing that just when you've reached the pinnacle of what you think body beautiful should be, there's probably another stage that you feel you need to achieve. And just as you're there, you're not really there for very long before all of a sudden age catches up with you. That's just the reality of this thing. To ground our dignity in that place is never going to satisfy us. And it's not an authentic vision of the human person that we can actually flourish in and form meaningful society around. So first of all, is to recognize that your worth is found in your dignity and not your body. And secondly, this is really important. This is the bit that often gets forgotten, because what we've tended to have of late is what I would call a self-esteem culture that has arisen. And lots of people have identified this particular problem, where we say to people, wow, you're beautiful and you've got dignity and your worth is, you're special just the way you are. But we haven't told them the second part of the equation that's really important, and that's the fact that your dignity, your unique human dignity, also demands action on your part. If you are a person of a Christian faith persuasion, you will probably remember when St. Paul talks about your body being a temple. There's something profoundly important about that truth. Even if you're not a person of faith, you might well have heard that before, my body is a temple. That notion actually speaks to the dignity of the human person, including our bodies, and the fact that therefore the dignity we have demands action. It's a call to us as well to respect and treat our own selves, our own person, including our bodies. That's part of who we are as persons. It's not separate. It's the whole part of who we are, treating that with dignity as well. So our dignity is a call to others to respect and treat us with dignity. It's a call for us to treat other people we encounter with dignity. And it's also a call for ourselves to actually treat ourselves with dignity, and that includes our body. So therefore, we need to actually take care of this temple that we're blessed with, and that's a sort of fundamental part of all of this as well. And so if you recognize that, then I think you're going to be, and by the way, this is a constant battle. It's a daily struggle, particularly if you really struggle with your weight. I know, I've been there, and I know how challenging this can be. And if you really struggle with this, you're going to have to keep reminding yourself time and time again, you have dignity. You have dignity, and that dignity demands action. It's not easy. A lot of days you're going to wake up and you just feel that you don't have dignity at all. It's going to be the furthest thing from your mind, and you're going to be tempted to throw it all in and give up and embrace the lie of fat pride and say, well, I'll just live with this state of existence instead of trying to do something about it. If you're not sure what to do next, and that is you that's struggling with a serious weight issue, I would say have hope, have courage. If I can do it, gosh, anybody can do it. Here's the thing to start with. Just pick one small thing in the area of exercise or physical activity, and one small thing in the area of your eating, and make that one small change in each of those two areas. So 2 small changes over the next 30 days, the next month or so. And just think to yourself, well, what's one small change I can make with my eating, and what's one small change I can make when it comes to physical activity, and make that change and just keep doing it for the next month. And at the end of that month, add one more thing in each area, and then at the end of that month, add one more thing. Now, the reality is that if you're really struggling with a serious weight issue, 12 months from now, you're not necessarily going to have resolved the fullness of that problem, but I guarantee you, you will have made some effective progress that you'll be able to look back on and actually take genuine pride in. Not fat pride, but genuine pride in an achievement that has moved you towards a greater level of human flourishing. Thanks for watching this episode of The Conversation. Don't forget to like, share, and give this video a thumbs up. That all helps the channel. And wherever you're watching, please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, Don't forget to hit the little notifications bell as well. That way you'll get updated about every new piece of content that we publish. A huge thank you to everyone who is supporting us at patreon.com/leftfootmedia. For as little as $1 a month, you can help to ensure that this great content keeps happening. So that's patreon.com/leftfootmedia. As little as $1 a month or as much as you'd like to contribute. And a huge thank you, as I said, to everyone who made today's episode possible. You guys are awesome. I'll see you next time on The Conversation.